Hello and welcome to the first impressions edition of the Colts Cover-2 podcast. I am Joel A. Erickson. I am joined by my sports editor, Nat Newell, who is subjecting himself to the categories for the first time ever. Uh, we we usually take a little bit of time to kind of set this up, though, before we get to the categories. And I think the thing that sticks out to me, I looked at you and I looked at Greg Doyle, our columnist, at some point in the game and said, when was the last time a Colts win was this surprising because of how complete it was? And I think what I came up with was the Buffalo game in 2021. I went and looked that up. They were kind of on a winning streak, but it felt like, in my memory, it felt like this team's not good and the Buffalo's going to expose them, and then they won 41-15. But that was the game I came up with. I don't know what else would be in there, because realistically, the expectations going into this game today were pretty low.
Yeah, it's not a surprise that the Colts won. I don't think it is a surprise that they won so convincingly. I mean, 33-8 is not what I was expecting out of this game at all. I've been a doubter of the Colts all along. I think it's fair to say. And again, I think there were positives to consider, but I didn't expect. I had zero expectation that we would see what we saw out there today.
There's an element of this performance that I think is important to point out, and we have pointed it out, even though people don't want to acknowledge that. Very, very small minority don't want to acknowledge it. Is that openers have a way? There's always a couple of openers every year in the NFL where what we see isn't what the team is going to be the rest of the time, and it's very possible that this is one of them, that they can't replicate this with Daniel Jones. But the flip side of it is, this is all we have, the 2025 Colts. We don't have anything else to go on. So yes, there's obviously a possibility that what we saw today is more of a mirage than what the Colts actually are. But it's really hard to imagine a better first glimpse of Indianapolis than what we saw today.
And it's possible that Miami is not any good at all, as well, as people have speculated on that too. But like you say, you can only go with what we know. This is what we saw. And again, like I think there's some weapons on offense that we saw tonight. The defense, is the Broncos going to look at what the Colts defense did and be able to figure a few things out? I'm sure they are. But hey, this is what we've got. And again, I picked them to lose this game. So who am I to judge or suggest that this is a mirage after, given how dominant it was today?
One of the other things, I think, before we get into the categories, just as to sort of put this into perspective, is, the Dolphins could be really bad. They could. That's very true. In fact, I think most people think that maybe this is Mike McDaniel's last season, and that the Dolphins are going to be overwhelmed. But I'm going to read off some games that happened at the end of last season, if for Colts fans who want to take this as something more than just the opener. New York Jets, November 17th of 2024. Colts win 28-27. December 1st, they beat the New England Patriots 25-24. They beat the Titans on December 22nd, 38-30, and then they lose to the New York Giants 45-33 on December 29th, before beating the Jaguars 26-23 on January 5th. All those games are against bad teams. Every single one of those games are against terrible teams from last season. They all ended up picking high in the draft. All of those games are nail biters that could have gone the other way, or in the case of the Giants, they just got essentially ran out of the building despite their offensive performance. So, if you are somebody who cares about point differential, that's the differentiator from them winning some of those games last year, is that they were actually dominant in this game as opposed to flying by the seat of their pants.
Well, and also the Dolphins have traditionally been a team that would have given previous Colts teams trouble. I mean, Tagliavola led the NFL in completion percentage last year. A lot of short passes, getting rid of the ball quick. And so that, again, if you want to look for a positive, that's one right there, is that not only was it a dominant performance by the Colts, but that it was against a team that does things that really caused them problems and has caused them problems for years.
Yeah, absolutely. There's you can go anyway, and absolutely, I think by the end of this podcast, we're going to get to a point where we're putting the brakes on stuff. We've got some categories for that, but we're going to start out with the categories as we always do. I am going to be very nice to Nat, and since this is his first time doing the categories, I'm going to let him bat lead off on just about every one of these categories, instead of making him react to mine. So we start out with it's a win. It's a big win for the Colts. So we start out with the hero of the game. Who is your hero of the game? Who is your hero of today's win?
I mean, I think there's two easy choices here. I will go with Shane Steichen. He's had plenty of people question his decision to play Daniel Jones, including me, I think including you too. And then to do everything, to see the way they came out today, to see Daniel Jones play as well as he did. Again, we've said they were one play away from making the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. That should have given some people some hope. And what you watch today is that, again, there's still no reason to think that they can't do some things with a quarterback who does who can understand what Shane Steichen wants and execute it. I mean, you wrote that exact story tonight. It's posted on IndyStar.com right now.
Yeah, Steichen. In a way, he bet on himself. He bet on his coaching acumen. But the other piece of it was he was kind of betting on himself as a coach, but he was also just betting on the fact of, like, can the quarterback run the offense the way it's supposed to be run? Which I don't know. It feels to me like people underestimate that.
Well, after what we've seen with Anthony Richardson, I think it's easy to underestimate that,
right.
Given that it sure seems like now. But again, Richardson started 15 games. They're 8-7 with him. That's not great. He's got plenty of numbers that say he's not played well. And quarterback wins are not the greatest stat in the world. But 8-7 is not nothing when you're thinking about it.
Right.
And how much of that is Anthony Richardson, and how much of that is Shane Steichen? And maybe we're beginning to see that it's Shane Steichen.
I think I said on this podcast at one point, I think after the quarterback decision, that I'm not sure that Shane Steichen is a developer of quarterbacks, but I think he might be a maximizer of quarterbacks. A maximizer, I still don't love that word. I think there's probably a better one. But I think that's maybe today, if there's a bigger one, it just feels like that. It feels like maybe he's good at figuring out how to get something out of someone. The other clear winner for hero of the day is Daniel Jones.
Yep.
The Dolphins, the Colts rushed for 156 yards today, but it was not efficient. It was not it was not one of those days where they were just getting whatever they wanted. Essentially, the Dolphins said, "You have to beat us with Daniel Jones." And Daniel Jones was like, "Okay, fine." In fact, they came out throwing. The first 5 plays, I think, were passes, and he went 4 of 5 on those. And there was a bad miss on a weird, like, too quick throw outside, but who cares if the next 3 passes are all completions? Jones is somebody that I had my own questions about whether or not he, like, everything everyone's ever said about Daniel Jones, that he works really hard. They said this about him in New York too. He does all the preparation, professionalism stuff right. But my chief concern was that there are guys who do that and they can't put it together on Sunday, and those guys are backup quarterbacks. That's what a backup quarterback is usually in the NFL. I wondered if that was Jones. He may still be that. We got to put that caveat in there. It's just the opener. But today was more than that. Today was more than a guy just he was actually able to do it. It wasn't just like classroom knowledge and being able to regurgitate the offense. He was good. He was legitimately good. He made some protection changes that they needed. The Dolphins, it felt like, I'd be curious to see what the Dolphins blitz rate was. It felt like they blitzed a lot but didn't really do anything with it because of his, and a lot of that goes to him recognizing it. He was accurate for the most part. He found some explosive plays. in a way, he was pretty much everything Steichen said he wanted to be out of a quarterback.
The other thing that's interesting, you made this point in the press box today, is that Shane Steichen had been we want explosive plays, we want explosive plays, we want explosive plays. And even last year, I mean, again, who knows, but it sure seemed like Richardson hit that unbelievably gorgeous 65-yard touchdown pass to Alec Pierce. And then Steichen decided that is all we are going to do, is we're going to throw the ball 65 yards downfield and look great. And so I don't know I have a great deal of respect for anyone who looks at what they're doing and says, hey, I'm wrong, or I am wrong about this and I need to change. And it's hard for me to think that that's not what Shane Steichen has done here and switched to Daniel Jones, who has physically has nothing on Anthony Richardson, yet Steichen did it and it worked. I mean, he deserves, if that's what's going on, he deserves a ton of credit for being able to make that decision, to self-evaluate and make that decision.
Yeah, it's also interesting just from the standpoint of Jones. I think this is another piece of Jones that's interesting, and why I think he's an easy hero of the day. His post-game press conference was all about it's just one game. We have to get better. We have to find stuff. We're going to have to keep doing this year in and year out. It's a good sign that he knows that. It doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't guarantee anything at all, but it's a good sign that he knows that one game doesn't crown him or fix anything that happened in New York.
Yeah, but do you think he actually believes that, or is he walking out of the press conference and jumping up and down and getting all excited because of how well he played? That to me, there's got to be some element of that for him.
I think if you signed a $160 million contract and only saw a year and a half of it, it would temper your celebrations.
That's fair. Although I would celebrate whatever proportion of the $160 million I got. So that, he's got that going for him too.
Okay. That brings us to the next category. This is going to be a very difficult one today. We've had this happen on the podcast a lot in the last 2 years, but the other way, where it's hard to find heroes of the game. The next one is villain of the game. Usually this is tied to the Colts. Do you have a villain of the game?
I actually have two. So if you want to go first, go ahead. I'll use my other one. If you pick the same one.
No, I need you to start while I think about it, because I'm having trouble.
Okay, well, the easy one is to say, anyone who doubted what the Colts were doing, what Steichen was doing, which I will represent the villains in that case. And which we've discussed this, so I'll also offer you my second choice. But clearly there are people who didn't think this was going to happen, and it did. So they're the villain, and that would include me. Now here's a more fun one: is Chris Ballard's the villain? Because why on earth did it take him this long to figure out that he needed depth on the team to fill the positions that didn't have enough players? It's not like people didn't know they had issues on the roster before this. This year, he went out, he signs Cameron Bynum, he signs Ward, he signs these guys, and guess what? They have a bunch of injuries in training camp, which is which you can't predict or whatever, and they still have play. They went out and got Xavier Howard, your favorite player, and I did not notice him once today, except when he was recovering a fumble. He did not make a tackle, but that's also probably because no one caught the ball in front of him. So the villain is now, obviously, Chris Ballard is a big part of what they have built here this year. But my question is, Chris, why couldn't you have done this 3 years ago and made all of our jobs easier by having a reasonable approach to roster building that might have been successful? Because when you've done these things, you've been successful at them. We can go on and on about like the cheap free agents that you've signed, and they were good. And you were like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I can sign cheap free agents and they'll be good, but let me challenge myself and just use the players that I already have on the roster because I picked them. So the Ballard one's probably more fun, but
that's a creative villain. I kind of like that. That's a creative villain to use. I think if I was going to go for any villain, more of the what happened in this game, I think I just go. This is nitpicking, but that's all we have are picking nits, and so we're going to go red zone offense. Yeah, Spencer Slater had to kick too many field goals. I don't have honestly, I don't have like a particular issue with it because one of them, Tyler Warren, pretty clearly got pass interfered with.
Yes, he did.
So maybe outside of maybe we can make the refs an unsung villain. I'll just knock that one out of the board because they took Tyler Warren's touchdown off the board for him. Do you have an unsung villain? You already kind of gave two. I think You know what? Chris Ballard is a fantastic unsung villain because unsung means no one's talking about it. And I think Ballard's probably getting some flowers for today. So I think you've already nailed yours.
So I do have another choice there, which would be whoever came up to, this is actually two unsung villains, we'll split it. Whoever came up with the nickname Danny Dimes, and then whoever came up with the nickname Indiana Jones, and then all the people who want to have a debate over what his nickname should be, because they're both terrible. So I guess Danny Dimes is better than Indiana Jones, but I just think that's a terrible thing that we have to discuss after a game like this.
Indiana Jones, wouldn't Indiana Jones be like the opposite of Daniel Jones's reputation?
Very flashy,
Indy's flashy and risky and flying by the seat of his pants. Like, wouldn't Daniel Jones' approach to the game be more like, I don't know, somebody you wouldn't put in a movie because it wouldn't
an
be
actual archaeologist whose life is probably not all that exciting, and you spend time with a toothbrush brushing dirt off of really old things.
Yeah. So unless it's like one of those ironic nicknames where it's like tiny for a giant person. I like it better.
I just think it's lazy. All I will tell you is that our assistant sports editor, Matt Glenesk, loves punny headlines, and even he rejected Indiana Jones. So that's all you need to know.
Okay, that brings us to unsung hero of the game. Who do you have for unsung hero?
Oh, I gotta find my. Did I do an unsung? Oh, I know what my unsung hero is. It was offensive line. There were legitimate questions. They got two new people in. One's Gonsalves is playing guard, which he's not played much of. I think Bortolini, most people felt fairly comfortable with, but after the Matt Pryor, Danny Pinter experiment, you had to be asking questions about that. Chris Ballard did not bring in any depth there, veteran depth there, and it worked out today, obviously. And, there's no reason to think it won't because they've got a strong offensive line around them. There were some questions about Braden Smith after what he went through that you chronicled in the offseason and the injuries he had. Is he ready to step right back in? But clearly, I mean, again, you mentioned, I think the run game averaged 4 yards a carry or something like that, which is not great. But only gave up one sack. I only remember one holding penalty. But a really strong performance. And again, I mean, whatever you want to say about Miami, they were supposed to have a good defensive line. That was the strength of the team by everything I read. So again, unsung hero, offensive line's an easy choice for me.
Yeah, mine's going to stretch the unsung part of it because I think he's probably getting sung, right? In the wake of today's game. But I think it's Lou Anarumo. We kind of touched on this already, but this is exactly the kind of passing attack that has shredded the Colts for like 7 years. Tua Tagovailoa gets the ball out of his hands really fast. They have lots of speed on the outside. He completes a lot of passes. That's the kind of team that you would expect them. There's been so many games that I've covered since I got here in 2018 where they've got 0 sacks or 1 sack, and you go into it afterwards, and the defensive linemen are just like, well, they got the ball out really fast. And there's really not anything a defensive lineman can do about that. There is something a defensive coordinator can do about that. And Anarumo did it today. It was very clear, very early on, that Tagovailoa did not know what he was looking at. Cam Bynum said even on his interception, he's like, he felt like that was kind of it wasn't a confident throw. It was Tagovailoa letting go and realizing, oh wait, should I have gone there? Should I not have gone there? I felt like he was hitching. I felt like he was either hitching or rushing, trying to figure stuff out. They dialed up blitzes with defensive backs that got home because it was delayed. A delayed blitz against a guy who gets the ball out in last year. It was an average of 2.42 seconds. In theory, shouldn't work, but it works if the quarterback doesn't know what he's looking at.
Yeah. And so Cam Bynum did a podcast in which he said, sort of talking about the celebrations he does, but he was also saying, Indianapolis, I am here. I am going to get you fans involved in the game. The defense is going to get your fans involved in the game. I normally kind of brush that stuff off. I don't know how much it matters, but it sure seemed like the fans were a little bit more into it. The defense brought a little bit more energy. A lot of anecdotal, the last couple of years have been pretty blah. And I'm sure there were, they always run down and celebrated in the end zone after big plays and things like that. But it really did seem like there was a different vibe to this defense than I've felt in the past couple of years.
I'm curious about the blitz rate. I'm curious about the blitz rate once they look at it, because I don't know that he blitzed that much. I think he just timed them really well. And I kind of asked Shane about that in his post game presser, and he was like, "Pretty good." It was pretty good, wasn't it? So that's Lou Anarumo. After all of the offseason talk about, is this going to work? Cincinnati was bad last year. Man, I know Miami's line has some issues, but I thought that the most interesting thing was it was clear he took them out of what they wanted to do, and Tagovailoa didn't know what he was looking at, and that's what he was brought here to do. That brings us to some of the middling ones. This one I think is probably going to be your favorite category. This is number of the day. This is for any statistic that you come up with that sticks out from this game, and you can take that literally in any way you want.
There's a lot of numbers to choose from here, but I will go with 1977. And this was not my number. I think ESPN came up with this one, but 1977 is the last time, at least. I don't think it's happened, and the numbers only go back to 1977. By the way, I read the information, but the Colts scored on every offensive possession, and that has not happened since at least 1977. 7 possessions, 7 scores. They did punt once, but running into the kicker gave them the ball back, and they went down and scored. That's just unbelievable. Again, like, it wasn't, if they had won this game 24-21, okay, I get it, I see it, but to score on every possession is nuts, and that's what they did.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, the fact that it was only 7 possessions is wild. Like, normally it's like 10 to 11. I don't know what the average is for an NFL game, but it's not 7. My number for this game plays into this as well. I got to get the exact number. I believe it's 38-43. Yep, 38-43. Yeah. And that's the amount of time the Colts had the football. This was the complete opposite of what we saw early in the season last year. Early in the season last year, there were wild disparities. Now, granted, the defense was giving up 11 billion rush yards in the first 2 games of the season last year, but the other thing was Anthony Richardson's offense had a tendency to hit a big play and then go 3 and out like 5 times in a row, and the defense spent all the time on the field. Today, the Colts' second drive took 8 minutes and 18 seconds, which is a bonus number of the day because that's longer than literally any drive they had last season. And that's how you get to the point where you hold the ball for almost 2/3 of the game. It's not possible to replicate that way. It's usually hard in the NFL to drive the length of the field and do that. But it's also, I think, a good sign that they can create some first downs and move the ball and do some stuff that's going to give the defense a rest. Because last year they had about as big a discrepancy as you can see over a full season, where it was almost 5 minutes more that opponents had than the Colts had the ball. Right now they're up plus 17 right now for the season.
The time of possession is one of those weird stats, and that every study ever done on it says it doesn't matter. But I do think it matters when it's in the extreme. I mean, mostly it's the numbers are so close together, and sometimes you don't have good time of possession because you are scoring fast, which is a good thing. So, but it does seem like it mattered last year. I do think there was something to be said for when you got Richardson and it's all or nothing. You are just putting the defense back out there. I mean, obviously the run defense was terrible in the first 2 games from the opening snap. So I don't want to say that they were tired, but why wasn't the defense wearing down the opposing offense by leaving them on the field so long? But it does seem like there was something to that last year, and it was impressive to see what they did this year. Again, another statistical thing is that you are better off just piling up first downs. I mean, that's what you win more games, the more first downs you get. So that makes sense that it works. And this is what they want to do. But again, it's different than what Shane Steichen seemed to be willing to go after the previous 2 years. So, it does seem like something's different here after one game.
Yeah. Well, it's what he said he wanted. What he said he wanted was to be able to move the chains. They couldn't move the chains. That the time of possession stat for the Colts last year, to me, is really, it's more because it's an indicator of how much they struggled to have, like, drives that don't score aren't necessarily valuable, but drives that go 3 and out are less valuable than drives that go 8 plays and out.
Yeah, and you also, when you're doing 8 plays, you're getting closer. You're backing the other team up.
Field position, I do believe in. And when you're even if you're getting 2 first downs and then punting, it's better than getting no first down than punting.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that I believe time of possession is a hugely important thing, but I do think there are circumstances. After watching the Colts last year, there are extreme circumstances when it matters, and again, they were completely different today than they were last year.
Shane Steichen, that it seems to agree with us based on his evaluation and how he turned completely around with the quarterbacks. So this brings us to the interlude part of the First Impressions podcast. This is where we do some of the more fun stuff, some of the stuff that isn't necessarily on the field. This is the game day observation, something you noticed from it can be literally anything except what's on the field, pretty much, or except what happens when the clock is running. Mine today is just one graphic. I think it's like a very small marketing thing, but I think it was a nice touch. At the end of the game, when everyone was leaving, and I think when everyone was leaving, I was down doing Steichen interviews, but the boards all said "won for Jim" instead of "win for Jim." And usually teams, when they do some kind of promotion for a game, like when the game's over, all that stuff's over. They just leave the score up and whatever was on the board. I know this from doing TV after, like it just stays there forever. Having the "1 for Jim" ready to go and just putting it up it was a nice touch to kind of wrap up the Ring of Honor day.
Yeah, and I was going to also we ought to touch on on putting Jim Irsay in the Ring of Honor. I came in, I wanted to know where they were putting the name because I knew they were running out of. Now we sit on one side in the press box. The Ring of Honor names go all the way around to the opposite side. There is one spot left. But I was thinking, are you going to put Jim Irsay there, especially since it's his daughter's making this decision, not him, obviously. And I kept saying, where are they putting it? Where are they putting it? It was on the same size as the press box, but it was below the press box, but it did seem like it was more prominent, which I think is great. I mean, you look at what Jim Irsay has done for the Colts and this community, and Jim Irsay is far from a perfect human being, as everyone knows. But you look at what he's done, what he's tried to do, and I just think I respect the fact that they had sort of, Peyton Manning doesn't necessarily get any special treatment in the Ring of Honor. I respect that. Everyone's in the Ring of Honor. They're all great players, all that stuff. But they did give Jim Irsay like a sort of a place of honor in the middle of the ring at the top of the stadium. It's just on the opposite side. I'm sure they'll fill in around him. I don't know what it looks like because I've only ever sat in the press box and Lucas Oil Stadium. I assume there's room to put other players around him, but I just thought that was a nice touch too, to give him to make sure it's a little special for Jim Irsay on the Ring of Honor.
I was thinking about this today. It's a little weird for us because even so I go down, most people know I do First and Joel for TV, so I'm on the field, but even then I'm on the same sideline. I'm on that home sideline. And so we are always looking at the visitor side. Like I looked up today when I was down on the field waiting to go on TV and looked at the home side and was like, this looks unfamiliar, even though I've covered however many games in Lucas Oil Stadium, because we don't see it. It's like a weird thing. I think with Irsay, number one, they've generally handled all the remembrance stuff well, having Peyton talk what he said, having Carly talk. They've all handled it all well. I think putting him in that spot, like you think about so much of there's so many different ways you could talk about Irsay in the wake of his death. But I think one of the things that's sort of self-evident, maybe because it's self-evident, it kind of gets overshadowed a little bit. It's just there's very few people who can say they were there for the beginning of the Indianapolis Colts and all the way up until now. And Irsay was a driving force the entire time they were here. He's a big part of the reason that Lucas Oil Stadium exists. So putting him in a place of honor makes plenty of sense to me. I think it's probably I wouldn't have thought about the placement when you said that. I was like, you're right. There's no spot to put him. But yeah, where he is makes sense.
And it's interesting that the Colts were not a good franchise. They were not a good franchise when Jim Irsay first became general manager either. But he eventually said, hey, I need to get someone in here who knows what they're doing. Brought in Bill Polian, let him do his thing, and they were successful. We can argue, it's pretty clear that maybe he took a little bit too much of a role in more recent seasons, but I certainly respect that. The other thing that always stands out to me is these players come out and they talk like, I mean, there's a real connection. I'm sure not everyone, but there are several players who have a real connection, or they're great at faking it. I don't know why they would, with Jim Irsay. And I just don't know how many owners there are in sports history. There are others, obviously, but have that connection with players, and we're able to. Now, again, we're talking about the stars too, but clearly it was more than just owner asset kind of deal, and and that's great to see.
And it goes beyond the players too. I think that's the interesting thing. The one little snippet of news I got out of today was that Irsay actually put aside money and ticketed it for staff members. And after his death, that they all these staffers got a gift from Irsay. My understanding is it's quite a bit of the staff. Like I don't know that it's going to guys who are under contract necessarily, but under major contracts, that kind of thing. But there's so many people who work for an NFL team. One of the things I've been learning is just how many tendrils the NFL has. And he set aside money so that all of them could have something after he went. I don't know if other people have done that. I've never heard of it. I've never heard of someone taking care of their employees in that way after their passing. That speaks to, I think, why the Indianapolis reaction to Irsay and his life is very different than national, is because here people are much more acquainted with, obviously he had his own demons, but here people are much more acquainted with the times he reached out to them, and it's more people than I think any of us realize. I think it just seems like with each passing month there's a new story. This is the one for me this time, is that there was something set aside for employees after he died.
Yeah, and you'd hear the stories of him handing out money, $100, $1,000, $500, whatever, to random people. You don't generally become as rich as Jim Irsay was. Now, again, he's rich because of the team mostly, but there's just a different dynamic there with him in terms of, the NFL wants every dollar, and hey, that's the American way, and whatever. But Jim Irsay doesn't strike me as that way. Now, again, the taxpayers are paying for the stadium. He's not putting a lot of money in there. I don't, let's be honest about everything, but there seemed to be a little bit different approach by him, a different view of the fans and the people around him than the average NFL owner.
We have one more category. This is kind of my category. It is 3 football things that gave me joy. The parameters for this category are kind of the opposite of the game day observation. It's something that happened in the game, and it's usually kind of in the weeds. We're in the weeds and the details of it. Number 1 football thing that gave me joy: the Colts have a fullback. They don't use him very often. He's actually their tight end, but they use a fullback. And someone in the press box said, "Are you sure it's not an H-back?" And when I asked Shane Steichen about it, he said, "We lined him up at fullback." So he is a fullback. I don't know why I like the idea of a fullback. I just do. I like that they have one. I like the fact that Tyler Warren can actually run as a fullback. That fullback dive can be used nicely, and they used it today. I got super excited. You don't see fullback carries very often.
Yeah, but all right. I understand what you're saying, and they did get the first down off, and there are ways you can use a fullback. But all playing a fullback does is you put the fullback there to block, and the defense has another guy there to tackle. So it's really not that interesting as a general rule. I have Tyler Warren thoughts later, mostly sarcastic, or not sarcastic, but just joking. So I'll save most of my Tyler Warren thoughts for one of the more difficult categories based on this game later.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing is everyone thinks a fullback is just blocking or running. But I grew up watching West Coast offenses, and I know that they are going to line him up at some point this season at fullback, and they are going to slip him out in the flat, and everyone is going to go, wait, how did they lose track of Tyler Warren? And the answer is because somewhere in their brains they've been taught you shouldn't pay attention to the fullback.
It is. It's also, this is the same thing with play action pass. Play action passes work. You have almost always have a better success rate running play action. And people will say, you're way behind or you're way ahead. Why are you doing it? Because the defense has been trained for 1,000 years to go after the run, which it's not even smart anymore, but because they see that fake handoff and everybody dives in because most football coaches are Neanderthals. And so that's why it works. And so, yeah, there's some of this stuff left over. This is, at some point the teams will figure it out. Now, once they figure it out, then fullbacks might be useful again. But as a general rule, I'm not anti-fullback, but I will say I think it's a little overblown for when you get
Well, that's why the Colts are perfect. They're only going to do it a little bit. Number two, just enough to make me happy. Number two, football thing that gave me joy. Anytime someone is a defensive lineman and they make an interception and it looks super athletic, it's fun. Laiatu Latu is cheating a little bit. He's not really a big man getting an interception. Of all the defensive linemen they have, he's the skinniest, but it was still a heck of a catch. It was a heck of a catch on that interception. We talked to him in the locker room after the game, and he was giddy. Give me defensive line interceptions all day.
I also love it when he said, he had some kind of quote about you got the defensive linemen making the interceptions and you get the defensive backs making the sacks. I love that too. Bring the variety, do different things. At some point it'll burn them, but who cares? The goal is not to, no one's going to be at bat 1,000. You got to do something that's fun and interesting and different that works. And as long as it works more than it doesn't work, then bring it on.
Number 3 football thing that gave me joy. The sneak is back. The quarterback sneak is back. I'll write more about this in the morning, but I actually think the Colts did the sneak 4 times. Didn't Jones score on two sneaks?
He scored on 2, I believe, and there is at least
I think there was a third and one, a fourth and one.
Yeah.
But anyway, the sneak is back, and here's the reason I like the sneak. The sneak, I think most people think of it as a really boring play. I can see that. The thing I like about the sneak is the quarterbacks who are good at them, they generally have their own specific way that they do it. So Drew Brees had the Brees leap. It was a sneak. He would jump up and just stick the ball over the first down marker and then bring it back. Tom Brady was kind of a burrower. I would call Jacoby Brissett like a pile, almost like he's doing a sled push. He would just kind of I don't really feel like Jacoby really looked for anything. He just kind of surged forward. Josh Allen has the look for the hole. He usually goes to the left. Daniel Jones kind of does a little bit of everything. It's going to be, and Shane Steichen pointed out, you look this up. He's 5th, right, in and ones?
I believe so, since he came into the league in 2019.
So that's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, all that stuff. Steichen said, and it's harder for you to do this. He can have somebody go break down tape and look at all of them, but supposedly he's 3rd best in actual sneaks in terms of NFL history, in terms of converting it. He did a little bit of everything today. There was some burrowing. There was one where he saw a spot to the right and kind of slipped over there. He did the turnaround backwards and just keep driving until you get into the end zone. I like watching the quarterback who has thought about the sneak. Sue me.
All right, I'm using sneaks later, so I'm not going to say anything else about
it. Okay, that brings us back to some of the more football-related details. The Colts won today. That brings us to too much credit, too little credit. We will start out with too much credit. Who's getting too much credit for the Colts win today?
This is where I'm using Tyler Warren. Obviously, he had a great game. 8th most receiving yards. According to StatHead, the Pro Football Reference research tool, 8th most receiving yards by a tight end making his debut in the NFL. But playing tight end in the NFL is really hard. The other thing I will say is every year there's 8 guys that people talk about, oh, you can use them in all these different ways. And there's been 3 coaches in the history of football who use guys different ways. Now, you covered Sean Payton, who is one of the 3. So you can weigh in on this. But I want to see it again. I mostly it's really hard to find too much credit here because of the way they played today. I'm just going to point out I'd like to see this a little bit more before I'm willing to buy all in on Tyler Warren. Now the other thing is they've got plenty of other receivers. They're going to have to spread the ball around. Maybe other teams will start taking him away. But I'm going with too much credit, Tyler Warren, because I got nothing else.
The thing that interests me about him is just that he's just a different runner after the catch. We didn't really see. We saw some of it today, but I think they're going to use it a little bit more. We have to see them do some stuff with screens and stuff. My too much credit goes to the running game. They had 156 yards, took them 40 carries to get there. The reason that they got 40 carries was not that they were tearing apart the Dolphins with the run, although there were some good runs in there by Taylor. The real reason that they did it was because they were up big and they wanted to shorten the game, which they did. The game was over at 3:45. It wasn't a great day for the running game. They weren't dominant. It was not a normal 156-yard game.
This is the classic. You run for 100 yards because you're winning. You don't win because you run for 100 yards. I think most people are familiar with that. Again, running game was fine. It was good enough. And I think, like you said, they were trying to take the run away and force Jones to throw the ball. In that case, 4.0 yards per play is not terrible. It's not what you want, but it's not terrible. But in a game like this, that's probably a better answer than Tyler Warren. Nah, you're right. Well, you had one that was terrible, so I think we're about even now. We'll see who wins. Then we'll add a new judgment of who won the First Impressions podcast. As long as I'm doing this.
That brings us to the other side of the coin. Too little credit. Who is getting too little credit for today's game?
I would say the cornerbacks did not get enough credit. Like I said, Xavier Howard didn't have a tackle, and I certainly didn't notice him getting beat. So for a guy who hasn't played in a year, that combined with Ward, who I think we all had high expectations on. I think Hill had a decent day, but certainly didn't make a difference in the grand scheme of things. So I don't think that the coverage corners are getting enough credit for what happened today. Given again that the Miami's got some fast receivers. This is not something that the Colts had ever spent any real resources on in the past, but I think today it didn't matter.
Yeah, I that's a good one. That's actually where I was going to go if you went somewhere else. Ward had 6 tackles. I think the thing that stuck out to me about Ward was just how fast he closed down on people in the open field. There just was not much yard after the catch on his side. That's the kind of thing. That's another one of those things that might be a difference in this defense is some of that stuff, because we haven't necessarily seen that in the same way. Too little credit. I'm gonna go. This is kind of a cop out. You might win this one. Spencer Schrader.
Yeah,
4 field goals.
Yeah,
4 field goal attempts, but they were most of them were short. Most of them were short. And he did have a 48-yarder. He didn't have to kick a 50-yarder, but he's also a young guy who hasn't kicked a lot. So he got his 4 field goals in. Well, maybe too little credit because no one's really talking about him at all. Maybe they shouldn't. We'll find out.
Yeah, I had Michael Pittman on my list too.
That's a good one. That's better than Spencer Schrader.
While Warren's getting all the attention, deservedly so, despite what I just said. He also had a great game. There's a lot of questions about him after playing with the. He literally had a broken back last year and still played, and so there's some people have been a little critical of him. But how can you be critical of a guy who still produced with a broken back? Is he an elite number 1 receiver? No. Can he be a number 1 receiver on a really good team? Yes. I think he showed that today. Also give him a lot of credit. He was great in the locker room. He said Warren could have done more. We're spreading it around, heaping out praise on everyone else, which is not the normal receiver attitude. So I also had him on my list.
Yeah. I think I used him as the lead quote in 2 stories about other people, which is, that's a special kind of mix that we have to do to get there, where we have one person but Tyler Warren and Daniel Jones do not like to talk about themselves. It does not help you when you need a quote to sum up a story. Michael Pittman Jr. did it for us today. Michael Pittman's better. That's a much better answer than Spencer Schrader. I should have thought back to Pittman. That brings us to the last 2. These are the sort of big picture takes. This is what we end the podcast on. We always start with one to throw away. This is something that people are talking about, or a narrative that came out of this game that isn't going to matter going forward.
I'm going with the breaking the winless opener streak. They had lost 11, or not lost. Everyone's it's really a stupid tie. Ties are stupid.
They felt like a loss. It's important to say that tie felt like a loss.
The Colts are 1-0 for the first time since 2013. But as we talked about in the podcast the other day, when they first moved here, they lost 8 straight openers. They had then not won 11 straight in a row. There is clearly some kind of curse around the openers. I give credit for the football gods. Hey, Jim Irsay has passed. You lifted the curse for this game. Great feel-good story. Next year, they start a new streak of not winning on openers.
One to throw away for me. This is a weird one because, like, I don't like. In theory, they could be. In theory, they might be better than any of us realize. There were a lot of people saying, and I think it was mostly tongue in cheek, but are the Colts really good? I think I'm throwing away the idea that you can know that off the opener. You just don't know. The game that sticks out to me is the one where Jameis Winston and the Saints like beat the Packers like 38-3 or something in an opener. And everyone was like, the Packers are terrible. And then the Packers won the division and I think had the 1 seed.
Well, go back to the Saints last year where they averaging 40 points in the first 2 games with this offense everybody's raving about. Oh, maybe they're really good. No, they were terrible. They just had weird things happen in week 1. The Bengals lost to the Patriots last year. Again, I tend to put a little bit more. Again, I said they were going to be 5-12. Maybe I'd adjust that by a game or 2 after watching this game. But still, they Miami might be terrible, but again, they blew them out. So I want to give a little credit, but yeah, we got a long way to go here. Let's see what happens next week against Denver.
Yeah. It's just not time to know. It's just not time to say for sure what the season is going to be. That leaves. I know some people would say, well, you're saying this stuff about Steichen's thing, but I think that's more an answer to people were saying that Shane Steichen was crazy for thinking it could work ever, like in any game.
Right.
And he was asked a lot of questions about that stuff locally, for weeks. So I think that's more of why I think it was a justification. But yeah, you can't say with any certainty what the Colts are going to be after the opener. We got to see them against Denver. That leaves us to the last one. This is one thing that we think from today to go on. One thing to go on for the rest that we'll still be talking about the rest of the season.
Oh, this is where I'm putting quarterback sneaks, obviously, since it's the last category. As you said, Daniel Jones is 5th since he entered the league in converting first downs on and 1 situations. He's 50 for 60. That's 83.3%. Jalen Hurts on this list is at 86.3%. So that makes me think that have faith in the numbers that we've pulled here. Number 2, even more so, Jacoby Brissett, short yardage god. I don't think you gave him a proper amount of respect earlier when you were talking about him. And this is 50 or more attempts since 2019. And the other thing, there are so many close football games. I understand why teams, if you have Patrick Mahomes, who we literally saw get hurt in sneaking the ball, if you've got a big-time quarterback, I understand why you might not want to do it. But you look at what Philadelphia has done with the tush push. It is a big advantage in a sport in which there are very few advantages that if you can, the sneak is a better first down converter than almost anything else. So when you can do it, and frankly, Daniel Jones is not Patrick Mahomes. Although I was joking with Nate Adkins, maybe Daniel Jones is not Alex Smith, but he is in fact Patrick Mahomes. The game. But if you've got a guy who can do it, it gives you an edge in a really important area. So you should do it. And, if this is for real, and there's no reason to think it isn't because he's done it and they were obviously willing to do it a lot. And again, like you said, I'm going off and 1 situations. Not all of those are sneaks, but it's the best number we can come up with. And the other thing that's interesting is that Jonathan Taylor, he's in the bottom of this list, not at the very bottom, but he's around 68%, I believe. I don't have my list right in front of me, but he's not very good in and 1 situations. So to have Daniel Jones be good at it, number 1, Daniel Jones is good at it. Number 2, you can fake that he's going to do it and then use, he can be a decoy at times. And then maybe that opens things up for Taylor going outside where he can use the speed. I'm all in on the short yardage stuff and the sneaks. And just to throw in, they were 3 for 3 on 4th down. Some of them were just barely on the Dolphins side of the field. They were 4th and short. We are always quick to criticize or ask, not really criticize, but ask questions. Why'd you go for it when it didn't work? What happened? We should also give credit that they went for it on 4th down and were very successful today. We talked about writing a story on it. Shane Steichen gave us nothing with which to write a story. But I do want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due, that they went for it on 4th down and were successful today.
I might try again tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see if I can get more of a fourth down philosophy answer. That's not really the kind of thing Shane likes to get into.
And it's because he's got to give you more like, here's my thought process, and here's the other team might actually learn. Not sure they would, but I get it a little bit. But again, I would love to know. I just want to make sure that we are giving credit where credit was due, when we will also criticize them or ask questions when it doesn't work.
It's the kind of thing that like I'll ask Shane about, and he'll like answer in a way that says, yes, there is something there, but I don't want to tell you, Joel.
Yes, and which is perfectly reasonable for him to do if it's a strategic advantage. I just got done talking about a little edge with sneaks and how big that can be, so I understand.
It's honestly kind of fun for me because every like 4 weeks or so, I trick him, or he just forgets that he doesn't want to tell me things, and I get him to actually say something about his philosophy. So it's kind of a back and forth game between me and Shane. My one to go on, and the sneak thing is a really good one, just because like we said, this is an opener. You can't go too big picture with it because you don't know. But mine is that Lou Anarumo's defense is going to be way more interesting than anything I've seen here.
Yes.
I don't know if it's going to be good, but it's going to be interesting.
Really going out on a limb there.
And yeah, I know, because what we've seen is mostly guys trying, like, yes, they use different coverages, blah, 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 whatever. Like, I'm talking about like to the non-football, defense trained eye. This is going to be more interesting. It just is.
Yeah.
Like the previous defenses, especially like they're just built on, sort of a static 4-man rush. That was what they believed. Anarumo, I don't think he's going to have necessarily high blitz rates. We didn't see that in Cincinnati, but we're going to see stuff that we haven't seen before. We're going to see, some delay blitzes. They, like, off the top of my head, they delay blitz the slot corner, the strong safety, and the weak side linebacker today on three major plays, 2 sacks and an interception. Like, we're just going to see some stuff. The other thing that's interesting is how many people are playing. When I go back and look at the snaps tomorrow, when the NFL has that up, Mekhi Blackmon is going to play way more snaps than people think. Cam McGrone was not a starting linebacker. He played a significant amount of snaps today. That's very different. The previous defenses did not sub unless they had to in the secondary and the linebackers. It's just going to be JT Tuimoloau was inactive. Maybe that keeps going. Maybe in a different matchup he's in there. Like, I just think it's going to be way more interesting to watch this defense week in, week out. They're playing more people. They're going to do different kind of things. The defense will be much less boring, and that's my one to go on.
And I think it's worth saying the Eberflus defenses in general were successful. I mean, they were. Yeah. Yep. I mean, they were not top 10 or whatever, but they were top half of the league. Gus Bradley's defense is less so, although, again, as we talked about it with the villain of the game, that, did Ballard provide enough for him to work with? But I mean, that's not what you're saying, really. You're saying is it'll just be more fun to watch them rather than, sitting there saying, oh, it's 3rd and 4. They're not going to get off the field, are they? Because they're going to go after them. Now, it's going to be 3rd and 4, and they're going to give up a few touchdowns because they're being aggressive. But that's how it works, and that's more fun to watch. And it can't be less effective than it has been the last couple of years, even though, again, to give credit where it's due, the Eberflus defenses were pretty good.
I have said for years, like, whether or not it's the right defense or the wrong defense, I just have more fun when the defense is creative. I just do. I'm a defensive-minded football watcher. Like, it's more fun when the defense is creative. So I'm excited because I get to have more fun. We'll find out if it means that the defense is. I mean, honestly, the defense is probably going to be better because they were like 29th in everything last year. But how much better, I don't know. I just know it's going to be more interesting, more fun, kind of like Colts fans had today as we get ready to wrap up the podcast. I think a lot of the reaction I got from fans, even in my like text messages from friends and stuff, was, hey, what's going on? Why is this enjoyable? Why are we having fun on the first week of the season? Someone actually said that in the Ask Joel on Twitter. They actually said, what is this feeling? Why do I feel good in the first week of the season?
Well, I know why I feel good, because this was a clear victory for me today in the First Impressions podcast. First time doing it. So, maybe you should be a little embarrassed. We can discuss that. But as Daniel Jones said, it's just one game. I'm in this for the long haul. We're not going to, we're not going to get complacent. Only the paranoid succeed, and that'll be our my attitude going forward in the first impressions.
Well, you're a more formidable opponent because you prepared. Nate,
Yes.
A lot of times, Nate, I would ask him, and he'd be like, "Wait, I haven't thought about that yet." So that makes you a more formidable opponent in the first impressions pod.
I probably cheated a little bit taking sneaks after you had put it out there, but I thought it was too important. I really didn't. It's too many easy. I wanted to go with something less easy, and I like the sneaks thing. So, and anytime we can talk about Jacoby Brissett, short yardage god, we need to.
We'll be back midweek. We'll look ahead to the Broncos, who I think are a much more difficult opponent because of their defense. Even though, if you go watch the highlights here of that game, Bo Nix is not going to look great. But I think it's going to be a much more difficult matchup. We'll have more on that on Wednesday. For the Colts Cover-2 podcast, I am Joel A. Erickson, and this is Nat Newell. First impressions are over. We'll get it up.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Oh, I forgot to like and subscribe. See, I really lost.